I had just been going through a very challenging period in my life. The situation had resolved through very specific answers to prayer that seemed somewhat extraordinary. I decided to go to a worship conference to express my gratitude to God. But while trying to worship, I felt a deep struggle within. I hadn't only suffered through this latest hardship, but it had so many in my life on a continual level, both before coming to faith and after. It never ceased to end, and I felt so disappointed with God for allowing all these things. I sought out a restroom and locked myself in and yelled at God. I yelled at him how angry I was and how disappointed. How could she allow all these things to happen? What was she thinking when creating the world? From the beginning of time, there has been so much suffering for mankind. Just suffering. The state of the world had also led to even God having to suffer and die on a cross. What was the point of it all? How could anything be worth it? After letting this steam out, it felt a bit easier to focus on gratitude and sing along in the worship songs. The next day, I was worshiping at another service. I had my eyes closed. Suddenly, I was standing in what I understood was heaven. I was in the outskirts of the most lovely garden, as if both being in it, but at the same time looking in. As I'm writing this, tears come to my eyes, and I wish I could take this experience and incorporate it into every person's mind in the world because it was so beautiful. But words can't even come close to describe it. So many impressions entered me at once. The first striking one was how totally transformed I was going to be in heaven. It was as if I was getting a taste of this transformation already. And the word transformation was so poor, it didn't contain an inch of what this heavenly transformation meant. I was starting to change nature into something entirely different, something totally other and altogether wonderful. I wasn't scared at all, even if I was about to leave everything that was familiar about being human behind me. I just wanted to plunge directly into it. I couldn't wait. It was wonderful beyond imagining. All the suffering in the world was just a little speck in comparison to this amazing existence, and it would last forever. The second striking thing was how beautiful Christ was. He was standing at a distance away, a little bit to the left in the garden close to some trees. He wasn't looking at me. I couldn't see his face, so it wasn't like a personal meeting, but everything in me felt connected to him. The beauty was his consistence in so many senses, in so many layers, way beyond what human nature could perceive. It was clear that around his being, everything else was centered, not in a preoccupied way, just in a restful, underlying way. And Christ was really, really restful. The word I think of is pacing. He was just pacing, just being. And through that, everything I saw stemmed. The garden was delightful. Everything there was beautiful, springing from this beauty of Christ, who was its gardener. It had a wild look. There were bushes, trees, and many different flowers. They had different colors, but still everything was pink. A very soft, warm, intense, and calming pink. I'm aware that the adjectives are contradictory. I was overwhelmed by the garden's beauty, too. A while after this experience, I thought that perhaps I perceived it as pink, since I'm a little bit synesthetic, so perhaps that was how my brain somehow interpreted my feelings. But when later starting to learn about other people's experiences of heaven, I've understood that some sense colors too. The longer I stood there, the more I transformed. I had a very clear sense that if I were to stay longer, I would actually be transformed the whole way through, no going back. But it was just a fleeting fact that my brain didn't bother with. I had all my focus on the beauty around. During this time, I could simultaneously hear the worship music in the background of my senses. I didn't feel as if I was leaving my body. I was in it, but very much more in heaven. I had just noticed how immensely beautiful the smell in the garden was, and was about to start exploring that when the worship music stopped. The drummer ended the session with a strong, emphasized beat. At the same time, I was in an instant out of heaven and back in the hall. While the preaching started, I left the facilities to digest what I just had experienced. As I walked over the courts, the trees outside were shining with a new beauty. I realized that the trees here are actually the same ones that are going to be in heaven. As I walked, I had a sense that people were looking at me. I walked over to a chapel in the area, and while walking, I had a strong sense of how Christ was present in every move I took and in every single detail of everything that is happening all around the world. I sat down at a bench in the chapel. After a while, I spotted a notebook laying next to me that someone had left behind. On its front cover was my name written with a heart drawn next to it. As I walked up to the altar, I read the passage that lay open in the Bible there. I felt that it spoke to me about my reasons for suffering and was comforting to me. Lighted over from the supernatural experience itself? Or have I? For one of the things about that experience was how absolutely natural it felt. Yes, I had just been in heaven, but it was the most natural thing I could experience. And yes, I was now walking on earth, but I felt surrounded by supernatural happenings, well aware that everything around me had a divine touch to it. For quite a long time afterwards, I had a sense of heaven being very intertwined with earth. I have 3 experiences, and this is the first one. My first ever childhood memory is hovering near the ceiling in my bedroom and looking down at my baby body in the cot. I do not feel any relation to this body, and there's a certain feeling of indecisiveness on my part as I'm considering if I should descend into the cot and merge with the body. In the end, I take a deep breath, pep talk myself, okay then, let's do this thing again, and descend down into the cot, merging into my physical body, and that's where the memory ends. It completely feels like a pre-birth, and the word again is crucial here. I clearly remember telling these words to myself and clearly remember the feeling of having done this countless times before, and this is just another Tuesday doing this. Also, I feel like there was no external pressure involved, and everything was my free will. No one pushed me, and there was no entity around me. What's confusing me is my body has already been born. Can't tell if a few days or months. It feels late for a pre-birth, but that's just how the experience felt. It 100% felt like I'm incarnating into a new body yet again, and a certain feeling of responsibility and mission. Was I replacing a soul that was there at the time of birth? Was this a potential NDE where I survived a sudden cot death? It didn't feel like an NDE at all, though. It didn't feel like, "It's not your time yet, go back." It felt like a first time incarnation into this body. Was it an OBE? But my intense feeling was that I've never been in this body before. Plus, I'm completely missing the ascending part, getting out of my body. So it's all quite confusing, and I've been trying to make sense of it. Overall, it's a positive experience, but the most fitting word I'd use is intriguing. This is my second supernatural experience. Between the ages of 13 and approximately 15, I have been extremely versed in Christianity and considered becoming a nun. I have prayed all the time to the point where my brain didn't feel fully present in reality. I believe my brain reached a stage similar to that of levitating, etc. Buddhist monks due to the intensity of my daily prayers and Bible study. I believe this is what caused my spontaneous OBE, which was completely unintentional. At Christmas 1993, I was in my room praying on my knees on the floor with the Bible open. Suddenly, a curtain opened. There was no physical curtain in that part of the room, and I found myself in a darkened room with 8 to 10 beings in dark robes and obscured faces looking at me. Despite me not being able to see their faces, I felt them smiling, and they said, telepathically, "Welcome. Congratulations, you found us." There was a beautiful warmth and wisdom emanating from them, and I instantly felt safe and at ease. While trying to work out who they were and gathering my telepathic skills to ask them questions, I could sense them winking at each other and whispering telepathically to each other, "Should we do it? Should we? Should we? Yeah, let's do it." It was all from a place of love. It was all hushed and so beautiful. At that moment, the scenery changed, and I was sitting on a cliff next to a sea, with an immense starry night sky above me. The beings were gone. There were only 3 things: the cliff, the sea, and the starry sky. Then it happened. I received the knowledge. Instantly, I knew everything about everything. Everything that ever has been and ever will be. Who we are, why are we here, and where are we going. It was a feeling I can't put in words. It was peaceful and intense, beautiful and humbling. There was everything, literally all the maths and science and astrophysics of everything. My brain was able to understand it all despite me not having any training in these subjects beyond secondary school. My master's is in music. But it was also all very spiritual and emotional and simple. The simplicity of it was what moved me. I thought to myself, so this is what it is. It's so beautiful and simple. For a while, I was taking this all in and then realized that at one point, I'll have to go back to my earthly existence and will lose all this knowledge. I decided to make a mental bullet point list of the main takeaways I could fit into my physical brain, as I felt the need to let everyone know about this, which was a big mistake because the moment I started to concentrate on my physical brain, the whole thing suddenly vanished and I was back in my room next to my Bible. The whole thing was gone, just like that. I had 2 overwhelming feelings: intense awe of what just happened and intense frustration with myself that I ruined it by reverting my focus on my physical brain. I also had feelings of physical discomfort, where I felt my body cranking up like an old car. It felt like my blood had stopped flowing for a while and it had to restart flowing again once I was back in my body. It was actually borderline painful. Also, my eyesight was very weak for a minute or so, and I had to adjust my vision. My immediate vision after I came back was very hollow and almost black and white, like an old TV. My physical reality didn't feel like the real reality. It felt like a hologram. I heard my parents in the other room, and they didn't feel like my parents. None of this earthly existence felt real whatsoever. Since then, I've been trying to find out who these beings were. After some research, I've concluded they were the Arabic jinn or ancient Greek daemons. I believe these two entities are the same type of entity. I believe they potentially could have also been aliens. I've seen YouTube channels finding similarities between jinn and aliens. They felt very real, but not entirely as physical as we are. But they weren't light beings either. They were too physical to be angels or light beings, so kind of in-between beings. This experience completely changed how I view reality. I am now convinced these beings watch us. The common theme I find with both daemons and jinn is that they can be either good or evil. The good ones do not let themselves be seen, but can guide you through your subconscious. The evil ones are more likely to invade your space. My ones were definitely the good ones. On that day, I was busy at work in London and was very irritable and agitated all day for no particular reason. A bit like time of the month, but way worse. I have even triple-checked the dates of the experience against my usual states of mind at particular times of the month, and it's inconsistent with the dates. It wasn't hormones. This mental gloom was made worse by the fact it was a January afternoon, 4:30 p.m, and everyone hates January afternoons. I was working in a fancy retail store in central London at the time, and the showroom was getting dark. I hated everyone, the customers, my colleagues, the whole world. Suddenly, the room lit up, and my first thought was, finally, someone thought of switching on the lights. But this light was different. It was golden, shimmery, and it surrounded me completely. I was immersed in it, like in some magic golden liquid. And then it hit me, a feeling of absolute love. Love towards everything and everyone, everywhere. I can't describe it. It didn't come from my brain. Absolute, pure, unconditional love. I looked at all the customers and colleagues I hated just moments before, and I thought, I love you, and I love you, and you, and you. I love you all. I felt one with all of them. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I was suddenly just able to feel this love for everyone. The next thought I had was the Raymond Moody book. I read it when I was maybe 11, 12, and a lot of it stayed with me. It suddenly hit me. This is exactly the light and the love they talked about in the book. It's the same thing. This feeling lasted for maybe a minute or two, I can't really say. Everything kind of stood still when I was inside that light. Eventually, it disappeared, bit by bit, as if it evaporated. I was just standing there, unable to move, trying to understand what just happened. And then I realized no one had turned on any lights in the showroom yet. The room was as gloomy as it was before this golden light appeared. At 6 p.m., work was finished, and I went upstairs to get my things. There were 27 missed calls from my father, letting me know that my grandmother had died at 5:30 p.m. European time, which is 4:30 p.m. UK time. I am absolutely convinced I have witnessed the ascension to heaven of my grandma, and she specifically made the effort to come to me and let me know she was okay, because she knew I would be in a very bad shape if she didn't. She raised me as a baby while my mom was at work, and we were extremely close. I am convinced if she didn't come to me, I probably would have been so traumatized by her death, I would very likely need medication. I am also convinced the feeling of absolute love and light I witnessed was the same as people who experience NDE often describe. Pretty much at the same time I had my experience with being surrounded by the light and infinite love, which was the time my grandma died. I was in London and she was in Slovakia. My sister starts calling my parents in a panic, asking if anything bad happened and if everyone's okay, because she suddenly felt something bad happened. This was a Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. in Slovakia, 4:30 p.m. in London, and my sister's regular calls are never weekday afternoons like that. It was a completely spontaneous phone call at the exact time when my grandma died. Both my parents and my sister have confirmed this phone call. This is a recount of my first out-of-body experience, OBE. It occurred in the summer of 1994 when I was a teenager living with my parents. For many years, I had held an interest in esoteric knowledge. While browsing books at the local library, one caught my eye, Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe. I borrowed it, read it thoroughly, and decided to attempt an out-of-body or astral projection experience. It took 3 months of dedicated effort before I achieved my breakthrough. I kept a journal of my attempts, but unfortunately, it has been lost for years, so this account is a reconstruction from memory. It was midsummer 1994. I went to bed around 10 p.m. and proceeded to induce deep, progressive relaxation. I quickly reached the vibratory state. In this state, one feels mechanical and electric-like vibrations throughout the body, a tingling sensation from head to toe. These vibrations respond to attention and can be moved by concentrating on different parts of the body. I had reached this stage in previous attempts, but this time it felt significantly deeper. I proceeded to try a series of exit techniques. The first was to visualize a rope hanging from the ceiling above my bed, and then to imagine climbing the rope with my non-physical hands. After a minute of this, I felt completely disconnected from my body and light. However, I wasn't fully out. I decided to imagine my body swinging side to side, and I began to feel a moving sensation, but still without complete disconnection from my physical body. Next, I attempted to roll out of bed with my non-physical body. As soon as I conceived this action, I heard a very loud sound next to my head, precisely like someone ripping apart a large cardboard box. The sound was so sudden and intense that it startled me, and I immediately felt reconnected to my physical body. I relaxed and restarted the induction, repeating the exact sequence, climbing the rope and swinging my body. When I reached the rollout attempt, I was met with sounds again, but this time I was prepared. The first sound was a tinnitus-like high-frequency tone that steadily increased in frequency and volume. The next sound was a distinct ripping and popping, like a plastic wrap cellophane barrier being broken. I had the sensation of beginning to roll out of bed, so real that I thought my physical body was moving. Then, I realized I was on my hands and knees on the floor next to my bed. I examined the carpet and felt strangely light. The room, which had been pitch black, was now illuminated with a strange, slightly blue light. The light was diffused, casting no shadows, and I could see clearly in all directions. I stood up and turned to look at my bed. I saw my physical body lying there, and at that moment, I fully understood that I had achieved an out-of-body state. I decided to leave my bedroom and explore. Upon reaching the door, I tried to open it, but I couldn't manipulate the handle, so I decided to try passing through it. As soon as I intended to do so, I began moving through the door, seeing the layers of wood as I passed. Strangely, I could also smell and taste the wood. In retrospect, the experience should have been shocking, but I didn't think much of it while out of my body. I proceeded down the hallway and passed through the sliding glass door to the backyard. I stood on the grass and looked around, feeling no cold or other sensations of the outside world. I had the thought to ask if I could see my guides if I had any. I voiced this aloud, "Show me my guide." Immediately, a clear voice whispered behind my left ear, "Open your eyes." Startled, I turned and saw what could only be described as a portal opening. It began as an oval-shaped, two-dimensional purple and white spiraling vortex, approximately 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, about 20 feet away from me. A humanoid figure made of white mist began emerging from the vortex. It stepped out and stood in front of the portal. The entity was male, masculine. I don't know how I knew, but I am fully convinced of it. He resembled the Michelin tire man, but made of white mist. He was about 6 to 7 feet tall, and I couldn't see his face or eyes, only mist where his head should have been. He didn't speak. I moved towards him until I was about an arm's length away. Then I sensed that it was all right to embrace him. I extended my arms in a hug, and he reciprocated. The instant I embraced him, I was overcome with the most intense feelings I have ever experienced. It's difficult to describe. Words cannot capture the emotions, but I will do my best. It was as if I knew everything was going to be okay, that I was safe, and a huge weight was lifted from me. I felt at home and cried in relief, a cry unlike any other, a cry of total surrender in the safety of a caring father / angel / guide / godlike figure. An emotional release so profound that it exceeded what is possible in the human body. It was a cry of all the worries of every entity in the universe being released. It was total, complete, flooring, and grounding. This description is not capable of capturing 1/1,000,000th of the intensity and completeness involved. My consciousness flickered, alternating between embracing the entity and having visions of other worlds. The worlds I visited were hyper-modern with floating sky cities, yet they evoked a strange nostalgia for the past, particularly for 1800s technology. I have a clear vision of being on a floating catwalk / bridge high in the clouds, leading to a hut / house. I opened the door and found a single room with a simple wooden chair, a simple wooden desk, and an old 1890s-style telephone on the wall. The phone buzzed, rang, and I answered it, holding the earpiece to my head and speaking into the wall-mounted microphone. I had the feeling I was connected to a busy modern call center. A female voice asked if I would like a guide assigned to me. I said yes. The voice paused as if she were busy, like looking through a list, then said, "Ah, yes, we can put you with Lisa." I had the feeling the call was over, so I hung up. My consciousness flickered back to the mist entity. I was no longer hugging him. I was standing about 6 feet away, and he was slowly backing into the spiraling purple and white portal behind him. I had the distinct feeling that I could not follow him. I then had a falling sensation and was immediately slammed back into my physical body. I instantly sat up in bed, completely excited, shocked, and bewildered. I spent the next 30 minutes journaling the experience. In my estimation, the out-of-body experience lasted about 10-15 minutes, but there were moments of non-linear time, timelessness, particularly when embracing the entity and visiting the strange worlds induced by that. This was my first experience of many more to come over the next 30 years. I still have experiences today and understand much more about the process and the places one can go. The more you explore, the bigger it becomes, and the less it seems that you really know. I will likely write up more of my experiences in the future. My OBE occurred after graduating from college in '73. It occurred in 1974. A friend came to visit. I started to feel funny while I was talking. Chest pain, thready pulse, clammy palms, cyanotic nail beds, sweaty forehead, rapid pulse. The next thing I knew, I had popped out of my body through the top of my head, and I was looking down at myself in the chair from above. My friend ran around looking for blankets to warm me up while I watched. It was amazing. I had what can only be described as 360-degree vision in every direction, along every radian. It was the ultimate univision. There were no angles I couldn't see simultaneous, but I could not go beyond the ceiling. I looked at my body in the chair, and just one profound thought came to mind: no more taxes. The experience lasted roughly 15 minutes, and then I felt myself being drawn back into my body through the top of my head, exactly the reverse of how I left it. As I re-entered, all of the pain returned, and I was thinking, no, I don't want to go back. I was warm, comfortable, free of pain, and disembodied. It was wonderful. Then I was forced to re-enter this physical shell we wear during our time here. In the years since that event, I've concluded I'm here because I still have some purpose. It may have to do with my daughters or their families. I don't know. We're never told why we're here. I believe that once we've learned whatever we're supposed to learn while we're here, we don't return. This event is the reason I no longer fear death. It's only an illusion, albeit a fairly permanent illusion. It was just an ordinary night. My dreams are never boring, and I usually remember them once I awake, but they fade quickly like dreams tend to do. It's a shame that my dreams are mostly about possible events and timelines. I rarely get to experience a fun tour with the birds in the sky, with me flapping my very human arms as if flying is an actual thing we humans can do. But yes, once or twice I've had the honor and I cherish these fine moments. But while my dreams are easy on the whimsical, they are very exciting most of the time. I wouldn't call them nightmares, but they would make for excellent action thriller scripts. When I wake from my dreams, I'm always bummed out that I don't get to see the next episode. So my dreams are vivid, not lucid, but sometimes I experience a dream that is more than vivid. A dream that feels real, still not lucid, that had a certain sparkle to it. Waking up from these dreams that I rarely have is very disorienting, and it is hard to let the dream go. They feel important. The dream I'm about to describe is one of those dreams. It's been a minute, but I think about it regularly. It was one of those dreams where you think you're waking up as usual, but then it turns out it was just a dream and you have to do the whole waking up thing again. That always annoys me. In this dream, my alarm clock radio went off and tuned in to the morning news. The news presenter started off with news that would leave the world in shock if it were for real. Michael Jackson, 50 years old, was found dead. Cause of death appeared to be cardiac arrest. His death took place right before he would start his highly anticipated This Is It concert. My reaction to the news was, as to be expected, a huge star dies at a young age, it'll get your attention, right? No snoozing, you're wide awake. And that's when I woke up in real life. Maybe because of my radio clock, I don't remember. But I do remember being very disoriented and my head was spinning. Trying to process the dream, it felt big and I couldn't let it go. I'm not a Michael Jackson fan, not even close. It was hard to miss the tour promotions. Other than that, I was unaware of anything Michael Jackson, consciously anyway, other than common knowledge. When I calmed down a bit, I was kind of disappointed that some details didn't rhyme with reality. I know, I don't wish harm to anyone, but dreams this vivid make you wonder, like, his age. I'm not sure if I believed him to be way younger or far older than 50, but 50 didn't seem right. And his tour, or not a tour, all at one location, that was already well on its way, right? I went on with my day feeling weird and full of adrenaline. When I arrived at work, I immediately told my manager and friend about my dream. She wasn't impressed because, well, whatever. Someone else's dream usually isn't that interesting. The dream was on my mind all day, and at the end of my shift, my very much so MJ superfan coworker arrived, and I jumped to him with the joke I had been brewing on all day. Such a shame, Michael Jackson dying. Just when was about to perform here, the Netherlands. I was aware he didn't perform in our country yet. I wasn't aware he wouldn't be performing here at all at that point. He did not appreciate my joke. I am aware that my jokes can be awful, in hindsight, unfortunately. He actually got a bit mad at me, saying he managed to get tickets to one of the shows and he would finally get to see his hero perform in real life. My bad. After that day, I let that silly dream go until I woke up from the sound of my alarm clock a few months later. The distinctive click when the radio is turned on, the news presenter announcing the 8 a.m. news, the first item of the day, big news that would leave the world in shock. Michael Jackson had died at the age of 50, right before his This Is It concerts would start. Presumable cardiac arrest? I don't remember which tiny details, but there were tiny differences between this real announcement and the dream I had a few months before. But not a lot. It was almost exactly like my dream. The whole waking up thing, the radio, the everything. And my dream turned out to be more accurate than my consciousness believes about the concerts and Michael's age. I do think that by the time I heard the news, the presenter shared more details about the suspected cause of death, but cardiac arrest was still mentioned.
I was in shock. And again, after hearing this news, I was wide awake. In that moment, I truly believed that I had had knowledge of something big that did not happen yet. And I couldn't wrap my mind around what that meant, what that implies about life, about what else might be possible. I was in an amazed state for days, and I was so glad that I had shared my dream with a number of people.
When I got to work that day, I couldn't wait to talk to my manager. I expected her to be as shocked by my premonition as I was, but she was very unimpressed. That made me start to kind of doubt myself. I am an oversharer. I'm sure you can tell by the way I use so many words to tell a short dream. So I shared my story with anyone who would listen that day, and a few days after, nothing but polite smiles and nods.
The shock and awe of my experience soon wore off, and I went on with my life. But every once in a while, it hits me. This was not nothing. And what does it imply? I don't know, and it amazes me that my brain is so willing to ignore the fact that sometimes I experience things in life that make no scientific sense. Things that should make me see new truths. But it's like it's too big to grasp for me. Okay, first, when I was in grade 1, I fell out of my desk. I remember the bell ringing to end the class. I was sitting in those elementary single desks with tube steel bending on one side and entry on the other side. I went to hop over the tube to get out of the desk. I heard crying. My vision saw all the kids lined up at the door looking at something. At this time, when I saw the kids, I was above everything. No body sensation at all. I looked in the direction the kids were looking, and looking down, I saw what the kids were looking at. Me, crying on the school floor. When my consciousness took over with the thought that I was seeing me and hearing me cry, spoof, I was back in my body and I stopped crying and stood up. I looked at the kids and they all just left, leaving me alone to absorb what happened. At that age, it made me aware of something else. The second time was spontaneous. I was having a couple of drinks and went to the bathroom. As I opened the door on my way out, there I was on the ceiling, watching myself walk back to the table. Again, once I realized my position, poof, back in body. No one noticed again. The third time, I was curious about past experiences. Laid down middle of day to meditate on the ether world. Totally clueless and in a black void. There was no need for breathing and no physical appearance. A grain of light. This speck of light started coming towards me. As it did, it started to make a whirlpool of light. Going from right to left, it went round and round in a blur of white, bluish light that, as I said, made the shape of a whirlpool of light. I actually had the thought of 1, what is that? 2, where am I? And 3, do I go into it? Move forward? Again, with the conscious thought, I was back on the couch. Also, a thought came to me. She is coming. And I stood up, major headache, back right, and lo and behold, my daughter came home from school. The guided meditation I was listening to was given to me by my wife, who knew I was feeling very depressed. I laid in bed thinking it wasn't going to work, but grateful for her concern. The narrator described a school. Go inside and find your teacher. After this, my life changed. I found Jesus waiting for me, and I knew he selected me too. The voice on the tape stopped. To describe the rest, you must know that I was abused physically and psychologically by my father, and I have been struggling to cope. I am not religious, but I believe in God, and I consider myself spiritual. I pray, but my prayers are prayers of gratitude.
I embraced Jesus. He was gold. I have never felt such acceptance, such strength and love, with an incredible sense of protection. Time stopped. We produced a screen with attitudes of my father on it. Together, we made the images shrink and go away. I began to hyperventilate, and each time I forcefully exhaled, the hideous images got smaller and then disappeared. In my reality, in bed, I became conscious every time I forcefully exhaled. Then I returned to Jesus each time. We worked together. We communicated without speaking.
Then I appeared above the scene, watching. I saw my soul return to my body in a gold column, and I woke up.
My life is different now. I feel like I have a wonderful Father now who is with me always. I am important, loved. I am not afraid to die. I know things now that I never knew before.
I have told this only to my wife, and she believes me. When I found this website, I felt like I could finally share this experience with others who may understand. Thanks for listening.
I had been feeling very depressed for 2 months by the day this happened. There had been issues boiling over regarding school for years at this point, and I was bound to have a period in my life that was terrible when I entered my adolescent years. And 2014 happened to be that period. When the ball dropped into 2014, I got this intense feeling of dread and doom for no apparent reason. On the following Monday, 6th January 2014, I had woken up in a rut and suddenly felt a big sense of burnout, depression, and loneliness spurred by returning to school. A lot of it was due to the stress and change of the first year of middle school. Throughout January, darkness set in. This was a standard suicidal depression, but I would regularly have bouts of derealization and depersonalization that would happen no matter where I was. My mind would regularly have cyclical thought patterns about eternal oblivion and question the soundness of reality. Throughout February and March, the height of the darkness, these feelings were at their peak, but on all days except one, I would generally maintain a solid grip on reality. Throughout this time period, the concept of death was often at the top of my mind. The one exception was on the worst day of them all, 5 March 2014, where after a really bad argument with a friend, who was the only person who understood what I was going through, I made plans to end my life. As I was preparing for the end, I was in my pitch black room, 7:17 p.m., and something changes. All of a sudden, I feel the presence of another being in the corner of the room. Death. The feeling of reality going out the window began to set in, and I felt myself enter a trance-like state, and visions appear above me in the darkness. I was visited by my great-grandfather, whom my mother compared and compares me to, and had died before I was born, and had visited my mother in 2005 during her NDE when my sister was born. He pushed me to stay, just as he had done with my mother 9 years earlier, and showed me visions of what my life could be like at different ages, but also how my family would react if I was gone. And through this, one of my mother's friends who had died by suicide visited me and reminded me of how her decision decades earlier caused my mother so much grief that continued until that point.
I told my great-grandfather that I had made my decision to stay, that one day I would get to meet him for real. And he told me I would know he was watching out for me if I saw a penny from heaven on the ground. The haze and trance began to fade, but the pain still remained. However, I never have felt like I've come that close to death, feeling it in the air, ever since even including when I watched my grandmother die 4 years later. And speaking of my grandmother, some of my memories from this event were unlocked when I greened out on weed 9 years later, 19 April 2023, which, while not the same kind of experience, was still noteworthy. Here, as I was in emotional turmoil from the traumatic memories, her, my great-grandfather, and my mother's old friend all told me how proud of me they were and how far I'd come from 9 years earlier.
During my early teens, I remember feeling a strong desire to earn my salvation by going to church and reading the Bible diligently, despite being told numerous times that God's grace is given freely. I struggled to believe that no actions or qualities of faith were necessary. I carried a heavy sense of guilt for my sins in the eyes of God. I now believe that this behavior was a result of obsessive-compulsive disorder. During an extended period of sleep that extended into the day, I remember having a brief spiritual out-of-body experience. I found myself transported to another realm with no recollection of how I got there. Despite the time that has passed since the experience, I can clearly recall the details of this realm. I remember flying above a crowd while holding the hand of a being I never got a clear look at. This person seemed to be a guide or some form of emotional support. The people below were cheering for me, and I felt an overwhelming sense of joy and love that was difficult to put into words. It was unlike anything in this world. I would describe the experience as one where feelings of joy and love infused everything with an unearthly golden light that enveloped the spiritual bodies of the crowd, as well as my own and that of my guide. This guide seemed to lead me to a threshold that opened up to a beautiful shoreline. After crossing this threshold, I remember seeing my body lying in bed. Without understanding how I entered my body and woke up, I was crying tears of sadness for returning, mixed with joy from the experience. My arm was extended over the edge of the bed as if I were holding on to the hand of the guide. Looking back, these feelings were complicated and new for me at the time. I had a second experience later in life. During a challenging period financially and socially, my wife and I were launching new careers. My wife secured a good job with the government, but it required over an hour's drive one way. Unfortunately, we weren't in a position to move yet. She worked nights, helping people navigate trauma, which added significant stress to our home as we were learning to handle life's most difficult challenges. Under significant stress, I experienced many prophetic and symbolic dreams. In one dream, I found myself inside a large furnace that seemed to turn on. I was holding on to a cage, and although the flames surrounded me, they did not cause any physical pain. Instead, I felt a strong emotional reaction of loss. This dream transformed into a vivid experience when a voice, which seemed to come from a waking state, spoke clearly and loudly in a powerful tone as if amplified by a microphone. The voice declared, "To whom everything is taken, everything is given." I remember thinking, that sounded like a real voice, not just a dream.
These visions were so meaningful that I have spent decades interpreting them. For much of that time, I believed the dreams were meant to describe the heavenly realm, and that I would have to endure suffering and loss before recognizing the Christ-like impact I was having on the individuals I encountered throughout my life. I thought the guide was Jesus and that the crowd represented the saints I was assisting on their journeys of redemption. I believed the voice was telling me that I would experience something very specific in this world and lose everything.
However, as my spiritual journey has evolved, I have taken a less dogmatic approach to my faith. Recently, it occurred to me that there was a much clearer message in my spiritual experiences. Both experiences occurred during stressful times in my life. I now believe that these dreams, visions, and spiritual experiences originated from a place where I existed before this life. I believe that I was sent here with the support of the guide and that the crowd represented my people. I was sent here to spread the love and joy that existed in the other realm, but I would have to temporarily lose everything from that realm. As I suffered as a young adult, I was reminded that although I had lost everything from my prior existence, it would return to me after I completed my mission and journey.
This interpretation aligns with the scriptures and only becomes problematic when religious dogma attempts to compel me to accept their so-called infallibility or exegesis. My experiences have inspired me to engage in meaningful actions and embrace life with a profound sense of purpose. They have empowered me to love myself and others, giving me the courage to stand against cruelty in all its forms. I was in a very bright place with my friends and beings whom I knew were close to me. We were asked to make a choice about what kind of body and life we would have in the future. I made my choice quite happily and cheerfully and told those around me that I had made my decision. As soon as I made my decision, we all started to ascend together in a dark void filled with columns of white light. During this time, I felt excited and happy. After that, I found myself observing the delivery room from a high position near the ceiling. The only detail I remember from there is the light blue color of the walls. For some reason, I never liked this color throughout my life, and I still don't. I also remember watching my mother and father around the house from a high position near the ceiling when I was a baby. Finally, when I was 20 years old, I dreamed of my mother looking at the kitchen ceiling in her house. I found it strange and immediately called her to ask what she was looking at. She told me that a slight water leak had started from the upper floor and she was checking it. When I told her about my dream, she was amazed and couldn't believe what she heard. At the time of the incident, I was under extreme mental stress because I had just lost my father, who had died unexpectedly. So there was no way to prepare for it. About a month after the death, my out-of-body experience occurred. I was lying on the couch at home, and although I was not sleepy or tired, I suddenly felt extremely tired out of nowhere. I closed my eyes and remember noticing a burning candle in front of the bookcase, which quickly engulfed the bookcase in flames. In reality, of course, I did not light a candle at the time. I must have been dreaming. And yet, my next memory is of waking up. The candle was gone. The bookcase was fine, as if I had just woken up from a dream.
However, at the same time, I began to rise towards the ceiling, and I remember seeing my body resting on the couch from above. I clearly left my body and looked down at myself, motionless, with my eyes closed.
A strange feeling came over me, hard to put into words. A strong sense of calm and peace spread through me, the likes of which I had never felt before or since. I was able to climb outside the house and see everything around me, what was happening. I saw my neighbors in their own apartments. I saw cars passing by on the road, the trees swaying gently in the wind. It was an unearthly feeling, a mixture of peace, satisfaction, and fulfillment, as if everything was as it should be.
I remembered the rest of my family and knew who was where at that moment. Some were working, some were running errands, some were on vacation. Whenever I thought of any of them, I suddenly traveled to the city where that person was and also saw from above what they were doing. It was like watching a movie from up there. What was happening to him, who he was interacting with. But this trip there was only a moment. I felt like I was traveling to that city almost at the speed of light. I wandered between cities, even countries, to see what was happening to which member of my family, to make sure they were safe. I was 19 when this happened, and I remembered my mother. I knew that it would be noon, and she would be heading home to me from work. So I traveled back to the city, to her work, and I actually saw her getting on her bike, heading home to me. I was still overwhelmed by this unearthly peace, and at the same time a feeling of non-judgment. No matter what anyone was doing, I had no opinion or thought about it. I just observed everything and everyone from up there. But it was as if there was a thin veil between me and the world, through which I could see. As I watched my mother ride her bike through the city, I suddenly became afraid of what would happen if she got home and found me dead, just like my father had been a month before. I was terrified by the thought. It was the first thought I had had since I left my body, and I didn't want to put an extra emotional burden on my mother by losing me too.
I remember she had already reached the stairwell and was pushing the bike through the door. She was starting to lock it when I became even more scared by the thought of finding me dead at home and somehow getting back into my body. I jumped up on the couch. A strange tingling sensation spread through me, and at that moment, I heard my mother enter the front door, the doorknob click. The out-of-body experience was the most bizarre thing that ever happened to me. And to this day, I get goosebumps when I think about how the timeline was right. As if it really happened, it felt real. And that he really came home when I saw him coming home from up there. Everything was absolutely right. It was only then that I read about out-of-body experiences for the first time in my life, and I read that extreme stress can trigger such an experience. However, even then, nothing explains the flow of time, that everything really happened outside of me as and when I saw it from up there. He came home exactly at the exact second I saw him coming home. I have never had another out-of-body experience since then, but the otherworldly feeling has stayed with me forever.